Severus Snape is perhaps one of the most iconic characters in the Harry Potter series. He has always been my favourite character because the level of detail and depth J.K. Rowling has put into him is nothing short of astounding. So in this video, I'm going to attempt to explain his story from his secret origins to his tragic death. I hope you enjoy. Snape was born in a Muggle dwelling called Spinner's End, where he lived with his Muggle father Tobias Snape and witch mother Eileen Snape, whose maiden name was Prince. His parents constantly argued, and Snape couldn't wait to get away from them, especially his father. He described his father saying, "He doesn't like anything much." His parents were very poor, and so Snape had to wear second-hand clothes that were too big for his skinny body. However, he lived near a red-haired girl called Lily Evans. Lily was part of a Muggle family, making her Muggle-born. She was also the only one in her family who had the ability to do magic. Even her older sister Petunia didn't have this ability. One day, when Snape was about 9 years old, he was spying on Lily and Petunia, who were playing in a playground. There was undisguised greed in his thin face as he watched the younger of the two girls. Lily was showing Petunia her magic by making petals of a flower open and close. Unable to restrain himself, Snape jumped out of his hiding place, startling the two girls. He says to Lily, You're a witch." But Lily, who did not yet know anything about the magical world, mistook his meaning. "That's not a very nice thing to say to somebody." She started marching off in the opposite direction with her sister. "No," shouts Snape. He hurries after them and explains what he really means, that she, like him, can do magic. Petunia gets angry with Snape and calls him freak, but Lily and Snape become friends, and Snape explains all about the magical world, about the Ministry of Magic, about Hogwarts, and even Azkaban. As they spend their days talking under a beautiful thicket of trees, Snape falls in love with Lily. A year later they are accepted into Hogwarts and arrive on platform 9 3/4, but before Lily gets on the train, she has an argument with her sister. Petunia finds out that Lily and Snape have been secretly reading letters she had sent to Dumbledore, letters that begged for her to be accepted into Hogwarts, letters Dumbledore kindly refused because Petunia was a Muggle and couldn't do magic. The last thing Petunia said to Lily was, "Apparently wizards poke their noses in everywhere, freak." Lily was so upset that she cried, but she still got on the train with Snape. They both got into a compartment where two boys called James Potter and Sirius Black were also sitting. They were also starting their first year at Hogwarts. Snape says to Lily, "You'd better be in Slytherin," but James overhears him. "Who wants to be in Slytherin? I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" When Snape and Lily left the compartment, James tried to trip Snape. He calls him Snivelus. That is the first of many times James and Sirius bullied Snape. But then came the sorting ceremony. The hat had barely touched Lily's head when she was sorted into Gryffindor. In response, Snape let out a tiny groan. When Lily took off the hat and walked towards the Gryffindor table, she glanced back at Snape, and there was a sad little smile on her face. Snape was sorted into Slytherin, but that didn't matter that much to him anymore, because Lily, his only friend, was sitting on the other side of the hall at a different table with Sirius and James. Snape excelled in all his subjects at school. He even became a member of the Slug Club due to his talent in potions, but Slughorn deliberately kept his picture at the back of his collection, claiming he did not have high hopes for Snape's future. He was also nicknamed the Half-Blood Prince, created from his mother's maiden name, Prince, and the fact that he was a half-blood. Since Snape was talented at potions, he made a lot of notes in his potions book, making subtle corrections and finding out better ways to make the potions. He even created a new spell, Sectum Sempra, an especially dark spell that causes lacerations in its victims. Over the years, Snape becomes increasingly suspicious of James, Sirius, and Lupin because they seem to disappear into the Whomping Willow every full moon. One day, Sirius decides to prank Snape, telling him how to get past the Whomping Willow while Lupin is still in the process of transforming into a werewolf. Snape is just about to enter the Whomping Willow when James hears about it and pulls him back, saving his life. This shows that despite James's dislike of Snape, he still doesn't want him dead. During the first 5 years, Snape and Lily remained friends, but Lily didn't like the company Snape was keeping. He had started hanging out with unsavory characters such as Goyle and Mulciber, who would later become Death Eaters. Snape also took an unhealthy interest in the dark arts, and even while he was at Hogwarts he was planning to join you-know-who. This obsession threatened to destroy his friendship with Lily. In his 5th year, Snape and everyone else was doing their Defense Against the Dark Arts OWL examination. After the exam, Snape wandered out of the hall and into the grounds aimlessly, still thinking about the exam questions, but James and Sirius followed him out of the hall. Snape sat under a tree near the Great Lake, unaware of who was around him. James and Sirius took him by surprise and disarmed his wand. They hit him with several jinxes. James said, "How'd the exam go, Snively?" "I was watching him. His nose was touching the parchment," said Sirius viciously. "There'll be great grease marks all over it. They won't be able to read a word." But Lily saw what was happening and told them to leave him alone. She looked at James with the deepest dislike. "You think you're funny, but you're just an arrogant bullying toe-rag Potter. Leave him alone." Lily's distraction had allowed Snape to crawl back to his wand, and he cast a spell that created a big gash on the side of James's face. But James responded by casting a spell that lifted Snape off the ground, upside down. This sent his robes tumbling over his head to reveal skinny, pallid legs and a pair of greying underpants. Lily, whose furious expression had twitched for an instant, as though she were going to smile, said, "Let him down!" Eventually, James took the curse off Snape. "There you go," he said, as Snape struggled to his feet again. "You're lucky Evans was here, Snivelus." Snape replied, "I don't need help from filthy little mudbloods like her." Lily blinked. "Fine," she said coolly. "I won't bother in the future. And I wash your pants if I were you, Snivelus." Snape later pleaded forgiveness from Lily, but the damage was already done. He had already said the unforgivable word, mudblood. Lily broke off her friendship. "I've made excuses for you for years. None of my friends can understand why I even talk to you. You and your precious little Death Eater friends. You see, you don't even deny it. You don't even deny that's what you're all aiming to be. You can't wait to join you-know-who, can you?" This only inflamed Snape's hatred for James even more. When he left Hogwarts, he joined and fought for Voldemort. Sometime later, he overheard the first half of a prophecy made by Sybil Trelawney. "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies." While he was still a Death Eater, he went and told Voldemort the prophecy. Meanwhile, James and Lily had gotten married and had Harry, and Voldemort later deduced that the prophecy referred to Harry, a boy born at the end of July whose parents had thrice defied him. About the same time Harry was born, Snape secretly stopped being a Death Eater and chose to become a member of the Order of the Phoenix instead. But he still pretended to be on Voldemort's side, acting as a double agent for Dumbledore. Now, Voldemort was very skilled at a kind of magic called legilimency, which allows the user to see into someone else's mind and tell if they are lying. However, Snape was skilled at occlumency, which allows the user to shield themselves against legilimency. In other words, Voldemort couldn't detect when Snape was lying to him. In fact, Voldemort never did find out the truth about Snape. But Voldemort still had the prophecy, and he was planning to kill Harry. Snape knew that if Voldemort killed Harry, he would have to kill Lily too, so he pleaded with Dumbledore, begging for his help, that he could somehow save Lily. "If she means so much to you," said Dumbledore, "surely Lord Voldemort will spare her. Could you not ask for mercy for the mother, in exchange for the son?" I've asked him." "You disgust me," said Dumbledore, and there was contempt in his voice. "You do not care, then, about the deaths of our husband and child? They can die as long as you have what you want." Snape said nothing, but merely looked up at Dumbledore. "Hide them all, then," he croaked. "Keep them safe, please." "And what will you give me in return, Severus?" To which Snape replies, "Anything." But 1 year later, Voldemort killed Harry's parents. Lily, the only girl he had ever truly loved, was dead. When Snape next met Dumbledore, he is described as a man who has lived 100 years of misery. I wish I were dead." "And what use would that be to anyone?" said Dumbledore coldly. "If you loved Lily Evans, if you truly loved her, then your way forward is clear. You know how and why she died. Make sure it was not in vain. Help me protect Lily's son." Snape decides that despite his hatred of James, despite the death of Lily, that he would help protect Harry for Lily, if nothing else. Very well, replies Snape, "but never tell Dumbledore. This must be between us. Swear it. I cannot bear, especially Potter's son. I want your word." "My word, Severus, that I shall never reveal the best of you?" Dumbledore sighed, looking down into Snape's ferocious, anguished face. "If you insist." So Snape became the potions master at Hogwarts, a position he occupied for the next 16 years, with the purpose of protecting Harry. However, that doesn't stop him from bullying Harry and basically being an unpleasant teacher throughout his entire education. He despised Harry because of James's abuse and Lily's rejection. Later, in Dumbledore's office, Snape describes Harry as mediocre, arrogant as his father, a determined rule-breaker, delighted to find himself famous, attention-seeking and impertinent, to which Dumbledore replies, "You see what you expect to see, Severus." Then Harry joined the Gryffindor Quidditch team, and Quirrell, aka Voldemort, tries to kill Harry by muttering a curse to knock Harry off his broom. But Snape, fulfilling his promise to protect Harry, saves him by speaking a counter-curse. 5 years pass. Voldemort has ordered Draco Malfoy to kill Dumbledore as a punishment for Lucius Malfoy's failure to retrieve the prophecy from the Ministry of Magic. Later that year, Dumbledore finds one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, a ring owned by Marvolo Gaunt, a descendant of Salazar Slytherin and Voldemort's grandfather. But when Dumbledore touches the ring, his hand gets cursed, meaning he has 1 year left to live. But Dumbledore manages to destroy the ring with the sword of Godric Gryffindor. Now, at this point, Dumbledore already knew that Voldemort had told Draco to kill him, but he also knew that Draco would not have the strength to do it, so he asked Snape to do it instead. "You must kill me." When Snape asked, "If you don't mind dying, why not let Draco do it?" Dumbledore replied, "That boy's soul is not yet so damaged. I would not have it ripped apart on my account." But before the 6th year at Hogwarts even begins, Narcissa Malfoy, who is Draco's mother, and her sister Bellatrix Lestrange go to Snape's house, where he is still living at Spinner's End. But Bellatrix still deeply distrusts Snape, so Snape asks her, "Why is it that you do not trust me?" "100 reasons," said Bellatrix loudly. She asks him a lot of questions, accusing him of being unfaithful to you-know-who. He answers all of them with convincing lies. But her main question is, why is Harry Potter still alive when you have had him at your mercy for 5 years? "I would have been a fool to risk killing Harry with Dumbledore close at hand," said Snape silkily. "And through all this we're supposed to believe Dumbledore has never suspected you?" "I have played my part well," said Snape, "and you overlook Dumbledore's greatest weakness. He has to believe the best in people. I spun him a tale of deepest remorse when I joined his staff, fresh from my Death-Eater days, and he embraced me with open arms." Because Snape was highly skilled at occlumency, Bellatrix couldn't tell that he was lying. Narcissa asked Snape to perform the unbreakable vow, where he would promise to protect Draco, and if it should prove necessary, to kill Dumbledore himself. If you break the unbreakable vow, you die. But since Snape had already agreed to kill Dumbledore, he made the vow. Later on in the year, Dumbledore reveals to Snape that Harry is a Horcrux, so in the end he must die and that it is essential that Voldemort should kill him. But Snape replies, "Everything was supposed to be to keep Lily Potter's son safe. Now you tell me you've been raising him like a pig for slaughter?" "But this is touching, Severus," said Dumbledore seriously. "Have you grown to care for the boy after all?" "For him?" shouted Snape. "Expecto Patronum!" From the tip of his wand burst the silver doe. She landed on the office floor, bounded once across the office, and soared out of the window. Sometimes a Patronus can change to match the person you love, especially after a heartbreak. At some point, Snape's Patronus had changed to match Lily's, in this case, a doe. As the Patronus faded, Dumbledore turned back to Snape, and his eyes were full of tears. "After all this time?" And Snape replies, "Always." During Harry's 6th year, he also discovered Snape's old potions book, in which Snape had only signed his nickname the Half-Blood Prince, and not his actual name, so Harry had no idea who the book had belonged to. He used Snape's notes to get top of the class in potions, but unfortunately, he also tested the Sectum Sempra spell on Draco Malfoy, which severely wounded him. At the end of the year, Snape obediently kills Dumbledore on the astronomy tower, and becomes, for the first time, a triple agent. No one, not even the members of the Order of the Phoenix, know that he is still working under Dumbledore's orders. They see him as a traitor and a murderer, and even Harry calls him a coward. When Snape is fleeing from Hogwarts, Harry tries to hit him with the Sectum Sempra spell that Snape himself invented. Then Snape says, "You dare use my own spells against me, Potter? It was I who invented them. I, the Half-Blood Prince." Because of Dumbledore's death, Voldemort takes over the Ministry of Magic, and Snape is appointed headmaster of Hogwarts. But Snape can still communicate with Dumbledore through his portrait on the office wall. Now at this point, Harry is trapped at his aunt and uncle's house and needs to reach the safety of the burrow where the Weasleys live. So Dumbledore's portrait tells Snape, "You will have to give Voldemort the correct date of Harry's departure from his aunt and uncle's. Not to do so will raise suspicion when Voldemort believes you so well informed. However, you must plant the idea of decoys. Try confronting Mundungus Fletcher." So Snape confronts Mundungus in an unfamiliar tavern. Mundungus's face is described as looking curiously blank, with Snape frowning in concentration. The Confundus charm is designed to leave its victims unaware of their current situation. "You will suggest to the Order of the Phoenix," Snape murmurs, "that they use decoys, polyjuice potion, identical potters. It is the only thing that might work. You will forget that I have suggested this. You will present it as your own idea. You understand?" "I understand," murmured Mundungus, his eyes unfocused. The plan was carried out, and the 7 Harrys left the Dursleys, but so not to raise suspicion, Snape took part in the attack to try and stop them. While he was flying on his broom, he saw one of the Death Eaters had his wand raised at Lupin's back, so Snape raised his own wand and shouted, "Sectum Sempra!" But the spell intended for the Death Eater missed and hit George Weasley instead, causing serious injury. A short time after the battle, he decides to visit 12 Grimmauld Place, in the hope of finding something that might be useful to him. In Sirius's bedroom, he found an old letter from Lily. With tears dripping from the end of his hooked nose, he took the page bearing Lily's signature and her love. He also found an old photograph of the Potter family, with Lily, James, and baby Harry whizzing around the room on a toy broomstick. He ripped the photograph in half, keeping the half with Lily laughing, and throwing the part showing James and Harry back on the floor. Later on, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are on the run from Voldemort, and they take shelter in 12 Grimmauld Place. Harry finds the ripped photograph on the floor, and wonders what it means. In addition, Hermione finds the portrait of Phineas Nigella still hanging on the wall, a portrait that connects directly to Snape's office in Hogwarts. Hermione freaks out when she realizes Phineas could be spying on them for Snape, so she takes the portrait off the wall and hides it in her magical beaded bag, so Phineas would only be able to see the inside of the bag and not where they actually were. But later, Phineas overhears Hermione say that they are in the Forest of Dean, and he tells Snape in the office back in Hogwarts. Dumbledore's portrait also hears this news and becomes ecstatic. "Good, very good. Now, Severus the sword. Do not forget that it must be taken under conditions of need and valor, and he must not know that you give it." Snape then approaches Dumbledore's portrait and pulls it aside, revealing a hidden cavity which held the real sword of Gryffindor. "Don't worry, Dumbledore," said Snape coolly. "I have a plan." So Snape went into the Forest of Dean, where he used his Doe Patronus to lure Harry to the frozen lake where he had put the sword. Harry dived beneath the water, and with Ron's help manages to retrieve the sword. Then Ron uses the sword to destroy the Horcrux. Then, 5 months later, the Battle of Hogwarts happens. During the battle, Voldemort realizes that he is not the real master of the Elder Wand. He believes that Snape is the real master, since he is the one who killed Dumbledore, so in the hope of gaining the true power of the Elder Wand, Voldemort orders his snake Nagini to kill Snape. However, in reality, Harry was the true master of the Elder Wand, because Draco Malfoy was the one who disarmed Dumbledore on the Astronomy Tower, and then later Harry disarmed Draco at Malfoy Manor. While Snape is dying, Harry finds him. Snape's memories start to leak from his eyes, and Harry takes them to the Pensieve, and finally finds out the truth about Snape, the truth that he loved Lily, that he was protecting Harry all along, that he risked everything for him. Harry ensures that Snape's portrait remained at Hogwarts, honouring him as a hero, despite all the years he spent being an unpleasant teacher. Harry later named his son Albus Severus Potter, and said that he was named after 2 of the bravest men he ever knew. In my opinion, I think Snape is a hero. He went from being a Death Eater, practicing the dark arts and working for Voldemort, to choosing to protect Harry, despite the emotional pain and danger it would put him in. Snape is the embodiment of Dumbledore's line, "It is our choices that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." I hope this gave you a new insight into the character of Snape. If you want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing and hitting the bell to receive notifications from this channel. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.